welcome to We the People. I'm Gargi Rawat. In a very welcome step towards doing away with stereotypes and perceived notions against women, earlier this week the Supreme Court compiled a glossary of words and phrases to be avoided by judges and lawyers while writing judgments or filing cases before the courts. The 30-page handbook on combating gender stereotypes states that words like slut, whore, harlot, seductress, fallen woman, woman of easy virtue, Indian woman or Western woman should now be referred to as just woman. The word eve-teasing will now be termed as street sexual harassment. And here I have to add that at NDTV, we did away with the word eve-teasing or the phrase eve-teasing a long time ago. We called it sexual harassment. Dutiful wife, faithful wife, obedient wife has been replaced with simply wife. Hermaphrodite should be intersex, and sex change is sex reassignment. And there are many, many more examples. We'll run those examples through the show. Now, this maiden step by the top court is extremely important, not just for the courts, but also for all of us as a society at large, for schools, for the media, for political leaders to be aware that words matter. And it's high time we did away with biased language that perpetuate certain gender stereotypes. Well, to talk more about this today on the show, we're joined by Meghna Kulkarni, member Swikar, the Rainbow Parents. It's a support group for parents of LGBTQ+ community members. Karuna Nandi, Advocate Supreme Court, Ashutosh Srivastav, Advocate Supreme Court, Brinda Adige, women rights activist, Rohan Bhatt, queer rights activist and lawyer, Kabir, a content creator. Thank you all for joining us on this very important topic so we can talk more about what the top court has, sought to do. And I'd like to start with you, Meghna Kulkarni, your views on this and how this should also be, a lesson to society at large about language and gender stereotypes.
Hi, everyone. The first thought that came to my mind when I went through this entire handbook was wow. And the wow was for many reasons. One, because the apex court, the top court has come out with such an amazing glossary, which will definitely, come down to each and every person who's on the street. I mean, it's not just the people who can understand the language, but this language will be, it'll come down to each and every one of us. And all of us will surely and gradually learn how to use the neutral language. It has to be a general neutral language. So it will trickle down to each and everybody. And definitely we will come to a point where the society looks at each and every individual for the worth that they are. And that made me really very happy.
Right. Brinda Adige, your comments here, and while of course this is not going to do away with certain notions that people have, preconceived notions and certain narratives that go against women, it's still an important step, and the need of the hour to create more awareness about issues like this and how sometimes we're just geared or we've been programmed to think of things in a particular way or use a particular language that goes against women.
You're absolutely right. Gendered language, gendered statements are conditioned. But the Supreme Court taking a stance, officially endorsing that these words and phrases are not to be used in official language, whether in speech or in writing, is something that we must applaud. Because it has been too long that we have allowed this kind of a language, these words to be used in judgments and verdicts and arguments in the courts, when the courts are supposed to be upholding constitutional guarantees of not just equality, but also dignity. And these words, the glossary that has been put forth, I think is very good. Now it is time for the courts to also say everybody, irrespective of their seniority, get into training, unlearn a lot of stuff, and relearn all of this that is most important to uphold, again, our constitutional values and principles.
Right, and there's also a need for society to be aware of this and also unlearn a lot of, notions that they have, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we begin with the courts because these phrases have continued and the courts have always been held as the final word in most things. So it is time that they begin. They have started with a glossary, and I hope they also continue with this practice and their vocabulary brings in all of these changes. Yes, our educational institutions, our training institutions, and our communities and societies and families need to unlearn, need to get out of that conditioning of this gendered feminine abuses that they actually give, which are feminine language abuses, must be done away with. But I'm happy that the court has come forward with this glossary. Like I said, time for them to also unlearn, relearn, and consciously practice this language of respect and dignity towards women and other people.
Right, Ashutosh Srivastav, some of the words that are in this handbook, one can't imagine that they're actually used in court or come up. Your view on this, and tell us about, any experiences you've had in the courts.
See, many a times it happens that the language, that is actually the most important factor in the entire judicial system, including the arguments or the judgments or decrees being passed from time to time. And I think there has to be some sensitivity when we argue or whatever it happens in the judicial system, because that every time the court is filled up with commoners also, people are there around, sometimes even in family matters, the children are also around. So I think there has to be a decency which has to be maintained in the court by the lawyers, and also while passing the judgments. There are many such instances which have taken place, and I have witnessed that the language which were used could have been somewhat decent. Because see, a court is a place where we go and we try to get justice for people. And while attaining so, obviously it should sound also in the similar manner, because the words which are being used, that works as a vehicle for concluding any sort of justice to the people who seek for, and they approach the courts. So I feel that it is a very correct move, and the Chief Justice has really taken this into consideration, and also with the help of many other judges and judicial officers and activists who have come across. And it was, I think, pending also since the pandemic time. And now it has been brought on surface by introducing this handbook. And I'm sure this will really serve a better purpose to the society as a whole. And the stereotype, the language, the words will take its, the back way, and the new way of judgmental process will start, which will give confidence to the people who go to the court that they can go with decency, with dignity, and they can, be assured that during the entire process, their respect and everything will be maintained while arguing during the arguments, or while submitting the documents, or even in the judgments. Many a times people are afraid to even to look at the judgment, what would have been passed, because there are many allegations being made by by the parties against each other. Those allegations are also written in the orders, in the judgments. So all these things, I think, will improve, and it will be a better idea, and it's a it should be applauded by all of us, actually.
That's right. Rohin Bhatt, your experience also, this is a start with this handbook being introduced. How has it been received? If you could share with us. And again, I'm asking, many of these sort of stereotypes actually used in court by the judges and those arguing cases as well.
Yes, I think it's definitely a progressive step in the right direction. I think since Chief Justice Chandrachud took over, the court has been making progress on inclusivity, be it in matters of caste, gender, sexuality, or disability. But I think while this book is a welcome step, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. This book, for example, is only published in English. A majority of people who interact with the justice system do so at a trial court level, where English is often not the language in which the proceedings are conducted. My second problem with this book is that it could be more intersectional. I think often when courts, for example, deal with rape cases, they sort of forget that caste hierarchies play a role, or the sexuality of the victim plays a role. For example, a lot of people I have interacted with have been subjected to corrective rape, because of their sexuality. I think this book could in future perhaps interact more thoroughly with intersectionalities in which people exist. The final comment I have is that words like slut, bastard, faggot, for example, where the court gives us alternatives, should perhaps be replaced with nil, and to make sure that the court makes a point that these words should not be period. The idea should not be to find politically correct alternatives, but to say that these words have no place in our legal system. Another thing that I think should be acknowledged is that the words like prostitute, which find our way in our statutes. For example, there the judges have little choice but to use those words because the statute uses that word. How does the court suggest that judges interact with that? Be that as it may, and be keeping all these quibbles aside, I think this is definitely a welcome step in the right direction. Perhaps with public comments, perhaps with future reiterations, there will be perhaps more inclusive language that is included.
Right, very important points that you're making there. Yes, this is a start, but clearly there is, more to be done, more left to, that is desirable, that steps need to be taken. But again, a first step, Kabir, as somebody, who's on social media, content creator, this is also something that is a lesson for media. Are you hopeful that, whether it be it films or content, that there as well we'll find a certain amount of sensitivity and awareness coming in?
Totally, I agree with, in fact, all the panelists that have just spoken about. I completely agree with all of the points that I've made. And just to add to those is that because courts really set the precedent, not just for the judiciary or the courts or the coming cases, but also for society. So in a way, the judiciary here is actually leading the society. And once they start it, I think this also is a testament to the fact that our judiciary is also like alive, it's breathing, it's evolving. So yeah, kudos to that, to realize that there are implicit biases there in the first place. And once they are called out, that's the first step. And then moving further from there, that the corrective actions are to be taken. But I still feel that even the current document that we have, actually the handbook that has been rolled out, does cover some sort of intersectionality. There's room for more, of course there is. But yeah, it's a welcome start nonetheless.
All right, Karuna, your comments on this. We've been talking about the handbook and how welcome it is, though Rohan Bhatt raising some important points. He had a few quibbles about certain words that have still been left in, certain sentiments that have been left in, which he feels should be done away with. Also, the fact that it should also be available in different languages. But yes, your comments on this very welcome first step by the Supreme Court.
I think it's an excellent step. See, the trouble with only having some progressive judgments, and a fair number of progressive judgments from the Supreme Court, is that it wasn't filtering down as much as it should have, right? Like, because the Supreme Court, whether it is saying something obiter, which means that even if it's not deciding a particular issue, but if it's just something is being said, then it still binds the High Court, and the High Court, their judgments on this to say that even obiter binds the High Court, and obiter and the High Court judgment binds the district courts. And when words like ravished are used for rape, right, and for something as serious as sexual assault, then it made it something different. When ideas of honor came into how sentencing was to be done, and there's a study that was done by Professor Mrinal Satish, when he was at Yale, that looked at all of the High Court judgments and all of the Supreme Court judgments on rape. And he found that if you were single and had never been married and you were raped, then the sentence was the highest, particularly because there was a presumption of virginity. When the person was married and there was an accusation of rape and there was a conviction for rape, then the sentence would be lower. But if the prosecutrix was single and there was some alleged prior sexual activity, then the sentence would be the lowest. So those sorts of ideas are things that we've been dealing with through the National Judicial Academy and the Delhi Judicial Academy, where I've done workshops in both. I've done a number of workshops. And, we must remember that judges are from the community that we are all from, right? And we all actually carry heterosexist bias. We all carry casteist bias. We all carry bias against those with less financial privilege, with class privilege. And all of that must be addressed. So it can't all be done in one go. This is a good start in terms of addressing women from different backgrounds. For example, prejudice against Dalit women, certain presumptions, prejudice that concerns Muslim women, different kinds of prejudice that plays out in different ways. Sometimes, and we found this in a number of cases, it's allowing others to speak for them when it comes to rights, as opposed to requiring the kind of representation in court that would be required if the case was concerning upper caste Hindu men, right?
Right.
I think all those issues are there, but this is a great start, and hopefully we will come to the other issues.
Right, and we were also talking about how this, is something that needs to start a conversation in society at large. There needs to be awareness in schools, in the media as well, about the kind of words we use, the kind of phrases we may use. Brinda Adige, your comments on the points that Rohin Bhatt had raised earlier when he said that, while it's a welcome start, he has a few quibbles. He also feels that this should be in other languages as well.
He's absolutely right, because we know that the English language is very much masculine. But if you look at our regional languages and the words that they would use to abuse or insult are all feminine in gender. And that is where our biggest problem is. So the court has done a good start with English, because much of the judgments are there in English only. The verdicts are also there in English. Almost all our laws are there only in English. But like he said, the arguments that are put forth by courts, not only the High Court, but below that also, is in the regional language. And that is why translating all of this is not only going to be a challenge, but it is important, because that is the language that we all use. And like Karuna said, all judges come from our own communities. So which means that our communities, societies, institutions, and families will also have to start working on shattering, breaking these stereotypes, especially with the language, because this gendered language of abuse is the first thing that, the first thing anybody scolds someone, wants to hurt, insult, is a word or a phrase where the woman of that family or the house or the other woman is to be insulted. So the regional language translations is important, but training is important, so much more important, because it's not going to come overnight. It's a practice. That is what I said. One has to unlearn. There's so much that person has to work on himself or herself, sitting in that position to be able to say, okay, I am not going to use this language. I shall not use this language. And that is why the training is required. And we need to begin with our schools also.
Right, absolutely.
And the person who spoke about the media, we must understand that they also promote a lot of this gendered notions.
I was the
of
person
what
who
a
spoke
woman
about
must
the
do
media
and what a man must do.
No, absolutely. Here at NDTV, in fact, when you have cases of what we refer to as honor killing, we a long time ago decided to call it dishonor killing. Eve teasing, we've done away with here. We call it sexual harassment. The Supreme Court in the handbook has called it street sexual harassment, which is very welcome. Ashutosh Srivastava, so once again, the Supreme Court, really leading the way on this issue, and politicians not so much.
Yes, absolutely. I think, there is improvement always in every field, in every direction. And whenever Supreme Court takes anything into consideration, now we have seen that it goes to conclude it, to find a concrete answer to it. and to finally adjudicate it and take a final decision. So I think we should welcome from one to the other. I'm sure there would be many other changes in different fields as well, which would be considered by the Supreme Court. We have many such kind of issues pending, and the hearings are being conducted from time to time. And this improvement everywhere in the entire country, in the judicial system, language, words, these are very, very important to be revised, to be made decent, which the Supreme Court has taken into consideration. And I'm sure things will improve further. So far as the regional language and other languages are concerned, as somebody rightly said, that all the judgments, though, are not in English, but yes, there is a start, obviously. And even if there is no such handbook for the regional languages, that doesn't mean that anyone is allowed to speak in any indecent manner or to continue with the judicial system, which is not in consistence with our constitution. So everyone is equally responsible. Even when there is no handbook, it doesn't mean that you don't have to follow a decent way of
the sentiment
working.
should
Yes.
travel
So that,
around all the courts and various levels. Karuna, and what we were also talking about is how this needs to be a starting point for society at large, the media as well, politicians, even in schools, to have more awareness around it, that words matter.
I think that's so true. But also, just to clarify,
Sure.
The constitutional courts all operate in English. So every high court in the country operates in English. The Supreme Court operates in English, right? A lot of the district courts operate in English. For example, I argued a anticipatory bail matter in Ambala a few years ago. And this is not common, it's true, but that was all in English. The judgment was an excellent judgment. And I honestly think that that judge is sort of worthy of the Supreme Court, but that was in English. So it's not, so language, yes, it's a step that can be taken and should be taken, but it's not as big a thing as, we might think it is. With regard to how we deal with each other and constitutionalism and constitutional values to be inculcated in ourselves and in schools and in the media and everywhere else, right? The idea of substantive equality, the idea of respect for wherever the other person is coming from, that they don't have to be like us, and to have to extend ourselves to understand where the other person is located. I think that is something today that is a really burning issue in our country. And with the divisions that have come in, the way to build up our polity again, our idea of ourselves as Indians, is what you are saying. To have it not just in schools, but to internalize it in the media, to internalize it in all of our, whether it's my chamber or whether it's how we speak in court or whether it's how we deal with people that we interact with on a regular basis. I think that's something we have to, in lots of different ways, bring and build our country back up.
Right. Rohan Bhatt, so your response to that, and we're coming to towards the end of the show, so final comments on this.
Well, I think I'm being misunderstood. This is, I think, a brilliant step that the court has taken, and well begun is half done. But it's only half done, half still remains to be done, is what I'd say. And my second, one more thing that I would want to point out is that language is fluid. It keeps on evolving.
Right.
What might be politically correct today might not be politically correct 10 years down the line. So this book is a good step, and I don't want to kind of, downplay the importance of...
No, absolutely not, but it was important to raise certain points that you did.
At the same time, I think as much as we laud the court for this, it's important that all of us critically engage with this book and to acknowledge that, for example, let's look at the word sex change, right? The court says the word sex reassignment or gender transition.
Yes.
A lot of queer scholars, and there's a broad consensus within the community that it's now called gender affirming care. That's perhaps one of the things that the court gets incorrect. And I think that's for us to kind of engage critically and positively with the court to kind of tell the court that, look, it's well done, but there are still a lot of things that remain to be done. Be that as it may, I think it's a welcome step and we should all appreciate it.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm out of time. I'll have to end this show. But thank you all for joining us. And the point is to create more awareness about this as well. A very welcome first step by the Supreme Court, and one that we hope will affect society at large and make us all think about the kind of phrases and the words we use. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.